Have you seen this documentary, The Most Hated Man on the Internet?
No.
Whew. Did you hear?
Who is the most hated man on the internet?
His name is Hunter Moore. I don't know.
Brendan Schaub just went like this. Oh. Whew.
I remember this guy.
I don't even want to get caught in these crosshairs. I don't even want to be close to this. Damn it. There wasn't... I literally...
Whew, that was close.
Joe Rogan's relationship with Brendan Schaub has to be one of the most confusing ones in podcast history. Joe basically saved him from an embarrassing end to his UFC fighting career, only to help him create one of the worst comedians and cringiest podcast hosts ever. Joe's so-called intervention with Brendan almost a decade ago was the turning point for Schaub becoming a meme. But at this point, Schaub's basically become a parody of himself. He's like an Inception meme now, a meme within a meme. And to make matters worse, he went on Chris Van Vliet's podcast last week and attempted to rewrite history yet again.
And my family was really mad at Joe. Really, man. I told Joe this. Like, my dad was pissed. My brother was pissed at him for that. Like, you see, it's a little embarrassing. But my brother and my dad didn't know. Is like, before I even walked out for that last UFC fight, I looked at my team before. They were like, "You're up, dude." And they're like 3-2. I looked at my team and went, "Last one." And they're like, "Oh, damn." I didn't want to do it. I'm like, I'm never doing this again. So I knew it was the last one, but then the fighter in me, when Joe brought that up, I was embarrassed and I was pretty emotional.
He's changed his story so many times now that it's hard to take anything Schaub says seriously. But before I take you through the most recent iteration of the world, according to Brendan Schaub, let's take a quick look at where all of this started. In December 2014, after Schaub's embarrassing first-round TKO loss to Travis Brown, him and Brian Callen went on the Joe Rogan Experience. This is where Joe Rogan hit Schaub with some truth bombs that were so deep and personal, it seems like he still hasn't recovered. And just a warning, if you're a Brendan Schaub fan, I'd probably recommend going to a safe space right now before watching this because it could be really triggering for you.
When I'm in there, I don't know, man. It was just, critiquing the fight. I felt like I was doing good, mixing some things up. I was loading up on my punches. He used his reach better than he's done before in earlier fights. He was more patient, not flying in.
He had a nice wide stance, too.
Yeah, we want him to come in. And the wide stance is when you stall, I started to throw inside leg kicks, which I should have thrown a little more, and I threw a head kick. And then some of the critique I've been getting is, how on the ground could you let him get to mount and do this stuff? When he hit me with the uppercut, I was out of it. And my initial reaction was, I guess, looking at the replay, to go, it looks like I went for a takedown. He kind of threw me to the ground. I came to with him on top of me. I came to as he punched me. That woke me up. I went for a heel hook out of mount, and my body just wasn't responding. You can see, like, it's kind of a half-assed attempt. My leg go real slow, and he just kind of gets out of it. So then I turn over. He hits me again. Then I'm back to normal. I'm cool. He's on top of me, pounding. It's doing zero damage. I'm not. There's no blame on Mario Yamasaki. None of that. You know what I'm saying? The blame's on me for eating that uppercut. That's on me 100%. I shouldn't have been in that position. However, under those circumstances, I was talking to Mario, going, "Do not stop the fight. He's hit me in the back of the head. Don't stop the fight. I'm fine." I'm looking at him wording this. Do not stop the fight. There's 10 seconds left, too. I heard the 30. I'm conscious of that, and I can hear my corner going, 15 seconds, shot, 15 seconds. So I just remember talking to Mario, being like, "Do not stop it, man," and then he stopped it. And then there you go.
He had to stop the fight, though. The way you were flattened out like that, you were just keeping your hands up by your head.
Defend, but when there's no damage, I think you have to take it case by case. I'm like, homeboy's talking to me while defending himself. Yeah. It's not like I was eating punches.
Well, he was hitting you, but
100%.
You were flattened out. A lot of things look bad about that fight. You were lunging with your punches instead of getting there with your footwork and then launching things from the proper distance. You were like really reaching and loading up. You looked very stiff. You looked very stiff. You didn't look fluid. You know, it just didn't look good. It didn't look like you were well prepared. Like your movement just didn't look like an elite fighter's movement. What you were doing was very, very stiff. It was very stiff, and it was like a lot of apprehension in your movement. You could see the way Travis is moving. Like his boxing was very clean, good technique, good movement. He's a bad motherfucker. You know, I was worried about you coming into this fight. I can tell you that right now. This is the reality of it. I worry about your commitment to fighting, and I worry about where you stand. Not your commitment to training. Not your commitment to training, not your commitment to give it your all. I think you have one foot out the door. I think you're looking. You disagree? Mm-hmm. I think you're looking at where the future is going to take you, and that you can't do this forever. You know, and I think that's a very dangerous place to be in fighting. And I've seen it with a lot of guys. They early in their career, they're invulnerable. They're beasts. They're monsters. They're 100% focused. Fighting becomes their life. It becomes their everything. And then somewhere along the line, they start thinking, how long can I do this? When's the out time? What's my exit strategy? If you had a wrestling match with Cain Velasquez, how well do you think you'd do?
Straight up wrestling?
Yeah.
I think people would be surprised.
Really? You think so?
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd be surprised. I really do. I think he'd fuck you up. And I say that as a friend and a guy who loves you. I think he's just on another level. You know, it's just different. It's a different kind of athlete.
You said that, Brennan. I mean, you've said that you'd probably end up on your back with Cain. I mean,
yeah, I mean that's not the fight there either.
Right.
If it's a jiu-jitsu match, it's a different thing too.
Well, if it's just a straight jiu-jitsu match, yeah, it's very different. But in MMA, obviously, he can punch you in the face when he's got you on the ground. I just think there's a bridge between you and the very best guys in the world. And I don't know if you can cross that bridge. And that's the reality of life. You know, like if you look at your fight with Andrei Arlovsky, if you look at your fight with Travis Brown, if you look at your performances in the octagon, not what you think you're capable of, not what you know you're capable of at your best, but if you have to judge it just by your performances inside the octagon, you know, you can go all the way back to your fight with Roy Nelson. You can go to your fight with Nogueira. You can go to your fight with Ben Rothwell.
Crow Cop.
Well, you knocked out Crow Cop, but the reality of Crow Cop is I'm a huge Crow Cop fan. Crow Cop has taken way too much fucking damage.
For sure.
Way
then what about the
too much
Gonzaga
damage.
fight?
Well, you beat Gonzaga. It was a good fight. Yeah, it was a good fight. Look, you've had good fights. You know, the Chris Tucker fight was very impressive.
Nah.
Like, look, you're a very good fighter. That's not what the issue is. The issue is, can you become a champion? If you can't become a champion, are you comfortable with getting knocked out 3 or 4 more times over the next 5 or 6 years? You know, and that is a possibility. It's a possibility. It might not happen. You might be okay, but it also might happen. It might happen 2 fights in a row. It might happen, you know, I mean, if you have to have a rematch look, if Travis Brown loses his next fight and you win your next fight and you have a rematch with Travis Brown by some strange unforeseen circumstance, it's a fucking tough fight for you again, you know, and it very well could happen the same way again. You know,
or
he's
it could
more
happen
fluid.
the other way, for sure.
It could, but he's more fluid on his feet. He's more lethal.
So Joe basically did him a massive favor. He was open and honest with someone who he considered to be a really good friend, even if Schaub didn't realize that at the time. And around a year later, back on JRE, Schaub showed signs of growth and maturity. He officially announced his retirement from the UFC. At the time, it seemed like a positive move, considering all the points that Joe made in the intervention. But unfortunately for the rest of us, it meant we had to endure Schaub's transition into stand-up comedy and podcasting, which is unfortunately still going.
For me, you know, and I talked to my family and close friends, and you were one of them, and Callan, and, you know, my dad, and you know, going through it, man, it just, do I want one more? Fuck yes, man, but it doesn't make sense. I can't see myself, and when it comes down to this, I can't see myself in a fucking Reebok kit walking out to that octagon. I can't see myself being like, you know what, cool, man. Yeah, that's what I'm worth. I'm worth $10,000 to you guys. I'm going to do this, you know? And I have other opportunities. And everything I have, and people think I'm this hater on the UFC or whatever. I owe it to the UFC, man. I'll always be indebted to the UFC. When I did that live show the other night, I thought Callan and our agent were honey dicking me, like this thing's selling out. And I got on stage with that mic. I was like, oh man, this is what I'm gonna. I love this. What?
Yeah.
What? This is insane, man.
Yeah.
Oh, now they want to do this tour and the things are selling out. It'd be tough for me to say, no, you know what? Let me go fight some monster who's been training full time, not telling dick jokes. And you know what I'm saying? And selling fucking big brown shirts full time. Let me go fight that guy. I wouldn't do the game a disservice. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't do that. So unless I could focus on it full time, there's just no way. And signing this Reebok deal, it's not going to happen, man.
Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from, and I completely understand the idea that if you're not 100% focused on fighting, it's just not something you should do.
At least Joe thought it was a good move. Around 3 years ago on JRE, they addressed the intervention again, and it seemed like Joe was pretty emotional about all of it. To me, it looked like he was holding back tears. His voice was kind of croaky in parts, which just goes to show you how much he considers Schaub to be a good friend and someone that he cares about.
I'm so happy you're not fighting, you know. And what we were saying was, I know that I was a dick to you to get you to stop doing it, but I felt like there was almost no other way that you were going to live. I felt scared. I've seen too many people that are just, there's a moment where it changes, where they stop being that person and they keep fighting. And you see it. You see the deterioration, and no one steps in, and no one stops them. And then you'll talk to them alone, man. Maybe you run into them in Vegas. Maybe you both have a couple of drinks, and you see each other at the bar, and you're like, hey, how's things? And you have these conversations, and then the reality sets in. Things are not good for a lot of these guys. A lot of these guys that have taken punishment for too long, there's no bringing them back, man. They get to this spot where everyone knows there's something wrong, and no one says anything to them. And I was real scared that was going to happen to you. I was real scared, you know? Like, I didn't anticipate, when we did that crazy podcast that wound up being, you know, this, like, intervention, I didn't even know I was going to do it. But while it was happening, I was like, you got to stop. That's all I was thinking is, you got to get out. Because we were a little high.
Yeah.
I don't even remember if we were drinking, but we probably were. But I remember being so sensitive to it. Like, there's something has to be done. Like, now you had so many other possibilities that if most guys that are all in on fighting, they don't have anything on the side. Like, there's almost nothing else there. No. There's almost just fighting and maybe a family, right? Mm-hmm. But you were starting to flourish. You're hilarious on podcasts. That can go away.
Yeah, and guys become shells, and man,
we see it, right?
Yeah. Dude.
Now that you're out, you see it, right?
Yeah. Thank God, or whoever's up there, man, for you and Brian Callan.
So you would have thought that after the way everything unfolded, Brendan Schaub would have put everything behind him and grown as a man. But like I said at the beginning, he went on Chris Van Vliet's podcast last week and basically embellished the intervention story, added in new details that contradict things that he's previously said. He previously claimed he was good to keep fighting. Even in the original intervention, he said he disagreed with Joe. He thought he still had what it took to keep going and become a champion, to beat the best. But now, almost 10 years later, he's trying to rewrite history again.
Do you think that conversation that you had with Joe Rogan, the intervention people call it, how much do you think that played into you going, man, I maybe need to rethink my career and focus more on life after fighting?
Well, I mean, obviously Joe gets all the credit, and that's my brother. You know, we talk all the time, and he's major influence in my career, like nobody bigger than him. But I think it should be noted, I've said this before, like I thought, months before the fight, I said it was my last one. But I think he was coming from a good place. You know, he's coming from a really good place trying to protect me. And I think in hindsight, it's like, that was the move. Like, you look at my life now, it's like, yeah, that was the move.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm working at a UFC gym holding mitts, I'm like, man, Joe fucked them. But Joe knows his stuff. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met. So he knows his stuff. So, and my family was really mad at Joe. Really, man. I told Joe this. Like, my dad was pissed. My brother was pissed at him for that. Like, you see, it's a little embarrassing. But my brother and my dad didn't know. Is like, before I even walked out for that last UFC fight, I looked at my team before. They were like, "You're up, dude." And they're like 3-2. I looked at my team and went, "Last one." And they're like, "Oh, damn." I didn't want to do it. I'm like, I'm never doing this again. So I knew it was the last one, but then the fighter in me, when Joe brought that up, I was embarrassed and I was pretty emotional. But thank God he did that.
But do you not go like, man, we could have talked about this off camera?
Yeah, and to be honest, when that happened, it was supposed to be a fighter and the kid, and the last second, Brian called and was like, "Hey, Joe wants to do it with us." I was like, "Yeah, I don't want to drive there, man. Let's just do it on Fire and the Kid. It'd be better on our show." And he's like, "No, we'll do it on Rogan's, but Rogan, that's not actually a JRE. That's a Fire and the Kid on JRE. Does that make sense?"
Yeah.
So it's a Fire. That's a Fire and the Kid show. I mean, it's our biggest show of all fucking time. But
Sure.
we could have talked about whales. It'd still be our biggest show on Rogan. But it was on Rogan's. It was in his studio, but it was actually a Fire and the Kid.
It was on your feed.
Yeah, and also it was live, but whatever, you get 50,000, 100,000 people watching it live. But the numbers come from when it gets uploaded. And after we got done, Rogan goes, "Dude, like, I didn't want to have that. I didn't think we were going to go that route. Who knows?" But he goes, I didn't think we were going to go that deep. Let's not post that. We don't want to post it. And Brian's like, "I agree. Let's not post that." I went, "No, you're out of your mind, man. Let's post it." He's like, "Why?" I'm like, "Because there's a lot of guys who feel the way I do. This might help somebody else." And it's also real. Like, I never believe in like editing and all that stuff. Like, if you're going to say something, ride with it, man. Unless there's like a huge error or something like that.
If I'm Joe listening to that, I'd be pretty pissed off. It seemed like the issue had already been put to bed, and Schaub was grateful for the intervention, but this just goes to show how damaged he was from the whole situation. He's going round in circles, and you can tell his ego is still getting the better of him. It's a pretty petty thing to do to bring up the whole situation and add in new details, which clearly contradict his state of mind from back in 2014. He definitely thought he was still in his prime after losing to Travis Brown in the first round. So to make it out like he was in control of his decisions back then and had a clear vision for his future is just straight up bullshit. I used to feel kind of bad for Brendan Schaub. He cops a lot of hate and most of it's personal, but I'm starting to see why there's so much hate for him. He clearly brings it upon himself, burning bridges with people who care about him. I also think he's a compulsive liar. He's been caught out so many times making up stories for clout. And if you want to be taken seriously as an entertainer, you have to have integrity for people to take you seriously, even if you're a comedian. Theo Von and Bobby Lee are good examples of how to build a career talking shit but still be taken seriously. Everyone knows they're talking shit, but at least they're creative and open about it. Whereas Brendan Schaub's ego is front and center for him. He'd rather feed his own narcissism. He jumps in the back of trends, but it ends up just being cringe as fuck. I shouldn't complain too much though. Watching his continuous implosion is kind of funny, which is ironic seeing as he's trying to be a comedian but isn't actually funny. But let me be clear, I don't wish him any harm or anything. I hope he's okay and has support around him for his own mental health. But at some point, he's going to have to look deep into the mirror and decide what kind of man he wants to be and what kind of legacy he's trying to build. Because at the moment, he's basically the most hated man on the internet. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button and become a subscriber so you can keep up to date with all my latest uploads. I'll chat to you guys soon. See you in the next one.
You do that History Channel show, hunting
Hitler. That was fun.
Did you ever find Hitler?
Yeah, so he died, and